it's a story. I mean, a mother brought you to Werkhoven. I mean, I've never been there.
Mother brought me to Werkhoven. Have you been there?
Never. Well, and then, I mean, it is traumatic, but it's also a great family history. I mean, there's so much to dig in, I feel. I mean...
I feel like I've had several different lives. You know, my father was a Baptist minister, and my mother was a Shanghai socialite. She was jailed at one point because she left her husband, this playboy, and she fell in love with my father, and the husband had her arrested. Yeah, and then he left to go to MIT. He had a scholarship, and she came 2 years later thinking she's going to marry now, without divorce of the other guy, marry this engineer, and instead finds out that my father has decided to become a poor minister. So talk about a change.
And then, of course, she has to face the death of her husband.
The death of my brother and my father, 6 months apart, of brain tumors, which I think would make anybody wonder about the coincidence of that. Is it purely bad luck, or is it a kind of bad luck that you should find the reason for, which is exactly what my mother did. And, you know, the answer to bad luck is to move to Werkhoven.
And she probably felt guilty somehow.
She felt, you know, I think a parent especially would feel that they hadn't done enough. You know, there's always one more thing you could have done. And my mother, if she could have turned the clocks back and time backwards, she would have done that. She did everything. Much to my annoyance, because I was ready to give up. I was 15 and I was already cynical. And I just wanted it to be over. I knew when they were in a coma, they were not coming back. And I had been this very good girl, went to church every day and didn't do anything. Playing the piano, studying hard, and everything went bad, and I decided I'm going to be someone different. And so I went wild when I came to Europe. I was still not wild when I was in the Netherlands, but I became wild later.
I heard you were arrested.
I was, yes.
In
I was arrested in Switzerland. My boyfriend, the very first boyfriend, Franz Adams Joseph Grunauer. I heard he lived in Amsterdam, actually. He came to live in Amsterdam.
Is he here?
If you're here, I'm sorry, I'm not trying to slander you. I'm sure you're a really wonderful guy. Today, you're probably a wonderful businessman or, you know, doing good for the world. But back then, he had, you know, he didn't have a job. And he had friends who were drug dealers. That sounds terrible, but basically they sold hashish, and, you know, I mean, it's legal now, isn't it, here? He sold the and my mother hired a private detective who was also the mayor of the town, because it's a very small town. And they compiled this evidence, not just on my boyfriend and these drug dealers, but on me. And so I was arrested. I didn't have to stay in jail. I had to promise I would obey my mother. I would never smoke or drink or do any of those things. And, you know, I was just like, yeah, you know, I promise. And
good girl.
Yeah, when I left my criminal record behind and started college in the States.
Good.
And I met this guy here on a blind date. My husband, who we met, over 44 years ago. Yeah, 44 years ago. That's probably longer than most of the people in this room. And
I bet. Talking about the book and a little bit about the research you did, because I think you really did well.
Thank you. That means a lot, because you are a sinologist, an expert in all of this and culture. So, thank you.
No expert on the Qing dynasty, because, you know, China.
It's a lot of history.
It's a lot of history. When every time I go to China, I tell I'm a historian and my topic is China. They say like, "Wow, Chinese history. That's even difficult for us. You know, it's 5,000 years." But I think you did very well, and I loved the part, of course, on, you know, the clothes, all the rituals in the courtesan house, because I had never read about this so extensively, and I think you did a lot of research. How did you do that?
There's surprisingly a number of books on courtesan culture, and also during the turn of the century when it flourished, and particular to Shanghai. The courtesan culture is different, for example, in Guangdong, in Canton. And so there were 3 academics that I was able to talk to, 3 scholars. Each one had written one of the books, and they didn't always agree with one another on interpretation of data. The strange thing was, there was a lot about how the houses were run, where the girls came from, a little disagreement on whether they were literate, how many of them were literate, what percentage.
Yeah. They could recite poems and sing. And,
whether they could sing. And, I was able to look at those facts, and also, at the Qing dynasty, what was going on there. Everybody has their viewpoint there as well, and the importance of all the different players. So I had to choose one and tell it through the viewpoint of a particular person. And that way, you take an interpretation. What the academics could not find was anything about the tricks of the trade, so to speak. The secret trade, this trade secrets, well, they remain trade secrets. And they were important because some of these women were reputed to have made their mark in history because of their sexual techniques. We just don't know what they were. We also know that wives paid courtesans to show them what had taken their husbands away from their beds. So we know that was important. And so I did some research there, but I had to improvise as well.
You read a famous book, I heard.
Yes, I read
The Plum?
The Plum and the Golden Vase, which is a very, very famous novel, very literary novel, but a lot of it was expurgated. All the good parts, all the literary parts, were expurgated, and all the nasty parts were left in, and so it became known as a pornographic novel. And then there were many versions of the sort of soft porn and hard porn. And the complete translation it makes it one of the most literary novels by Anonymous, and also one of the most pornographic ones, same time.
Yeah, I think it's banned in China, right?
Yes, which means it's widely read.
It's true. Well, it's maybe a very cliche question, but it's something that made me, some way I wanted to ask you. What are your sources of inspiration? I mean, I think it's family, of course, but I think you're very creative, and you're very humorous, and you look at the world in a very open way. So I'm just wonder what makes you write.
I always go through my mind, what is this notion we have about creativity? And you were saying that you saw this video, a TED Talk that I gave on creativity. And I started preparing for that, not knowing at all what I would say. How can you describe that? How do you go in somebody's brain and pull out exactly what's happening with the synapses and then interacting with the physical world that creates what somebody terms creative? And I looked at the possibility that it might be something innate that you're born with, that your brain is configured in a certain way to love words and to manipulate things and see things in a certain way that leads to greater imagination. But what does greater imagination mean? Does it mean outside of reality? So again, it comes up with these questions. I think what makes me what gives me inspiration is simply these questions that I have to ask, and seeing them reflected in everyday life all the time. If you ask a question like, what is love or what is forgiveness, you're going to see examples of it all the next week, constantly. Different examples of fake love, true love, lost love, whatever. If you pick a focus, you'll see it. That's that is the beauty of a focus, and all this becomes a filter that comes to you. It seems like coincidence. I also think that the older I get, the more experiences I've had, and that I realize that imagination and inspiration comes from many more associations that happen spontaneously, and they jump into the same territory. So we often keep this part of how we think here and this part here, and then suddenly they just merge automatically without effort. And I believe that that process, or I wouldn't call it a process, it's like breathing or digesting or something. It just occurs. And then this inspiration is really pulling things out of these filters that I have accumulated, which includes things about my personal past, certainly, a lot about that, as well as my family's past, and the questions. I mean, this photo, I thought I was done with family secrets, and then I see the photo, and now I've heard another secret, about my mother, and I'm thinking, oh, yeah, no, I mean, they never stop. They never stop. Yeah, I mean, that's good and that's bad, but it causes me to re-examine over and over again my life, which is good. It's good. I don't like that kind of stability of thought.
Well, it struck me when you said that your sister said that her imagination got rusted somehow. Huh?
Oh, she said that, but she is so imaginative. She can get herself out of and into any situation she wants. We have different forms of creativity, and it's not just painting or writing or, sculpting.
Cooking.
Yeah, no, I mean cooking. She's an amazing cook, but she can also find a way to solve a problem. And one of the things she said when she and her husband went to the United States, he had been a surgeon, and of course he wasn't qualified to be a surgeon once he was in Wisconsin. And so he worked as a cook in a restaurant. And one day, he was a surgical assistant, and it was really demeaning to go from surgeon to handing the knives, and just doing this. And one day my sister said to him, "Time to change the little knife to a big knife." Tap, 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 tap. And then they opened up a restaurant. She's funny. She's hilarious. She comes and stays with us. We fly her out, and she stays with us for 10 days and cooks. And if I were mercenary, I'd just bring her in every few months and write down everything she says.
And do you communicate in English with each other?
Mostly in Chinese, half in Chinese, half in English. When we're in China, definitely in Chinese. She does speak English, but she's much more comfortable in Chinese. And because most of our conversation is about food, whether or not you're fat or thin, whether that looks good, or a lot of family gossip, we can do that in Chinese.
Good.
So, yeah, family gossip is always better in Chinese. So they have this one, it comes with gestures that really are painful. Like one of them is, I don't know if you've ever encountered this. I'm not going to do it the way that it actually happens to me.
Mm-mm.
It's punching the person in the arm saying, "Now do you believe me?"
Yeah.
Yeah. "Now do you believe me?" It's like, ow, yes, I do.
They do that, yeah.
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 So they're telling
and
you
they're always
something.
also very direct. I mean,
Yeah.
asking you, like telling you, like how tired you are.
Yeah,
looking.
yeah.
Like,
Oh,
it's
you
like,
look
thank
much
you.
older than you did, last month, or you've gotten so fat. Or the thin one is, "You should eat more, you look sick."
So do you go often to China to see them?
I used to go at least once a year. To my friends who go every month, that is not very often. So it's a matter of perspective how often once a year is. And sometimes twice a year. But I haven't been back in a year and a half, closing on 2 years, because I've done so much traveling.
Yeah. You're in a
Book tour,
Yeah.
and you just want to be home. You're not going to add on any more trips.
So after this tour, you will write again. I think
I
you're
will
busy.
write, yes.
What are you going to? What is your next book?
I'm going to write a nonfiction book, and I already started it. I couldn't really write the novel. I've learned that it's very bad to write a novel when you're in the midst of telling people during an interview what your latest book is about. So I decided that, actually, I didn't decide this. My editor decided when he asked me what this book was about when I was about to begin. I hated that question, because what you do is you say, well, it's about 3 women who go on this journey and they find, and it's so flattened out as this narrative. It's none of the things that I've told you up here of what I think about that goes into the book. And I decided to write him a note, and it was called About the About, which is about me, the writer. It was about 4,000 words, and it just was... it just went on, it just spilled out of me, and I gave it to him, and he said he wanted to publish it. And I said, this is so private, you don't get to publish this, I'm just telling you who I am as a writer. So he says, okay, we won't do that. And then throughout the writing of the book, we were emailing one another, and we ended up with it's probably like 2,000 emails now. It was 1,500 emails, and they weren't all informative. They were all things like, yes, meet at 15 Ludlow or something. But a lot of them did have to do with writing. Some of it very particular to the book, The Valley of Amazement, and some of it just about how I see many topics, like death. I think about death every day. And it is not with a sense of fear. I'm not looking at it and saying, oh my God, I'm going to die, what am I going to do? But it's the nature of life and death and love and all of that mixed together. I think people look at death in a fitting into a certain parameter as opposed to going into these other extensions of who we are and how we become, all the way up into death, because death is really almost like a guiding point subconsciously that many of us have, whether we die at a time that we think we're going to die or die accidentally. Actually, a lot of people, my editor does not like to talk about death. He's very nervous about elevators and things, and I said, a lot of people are afraid, and I don't know why people daily don't go running out of buildings screaming, I'm going to die, because it's inevitable.
Is it something that is a theme for you for a long time, like this death?
Well, a lot of death has happened in our family, and so it's caused me to think about it, and the nature of it. And also, because I had a father who was a minister, there was always an afterlife. But the afterlife depended on certain conditions, namely, in his religion, baptism. And so, I had to think again, what do we mean by afterlife? Is there an afterlife? Is there consciousness? What is all this, what does this matter according to what we do today? Those kinds of questions, the usual questions.
I don't think you believe in fate. I mean, I think you have still the feeling that you can change things.
In fate or faith?
Fate. No, fate. Yeah.
Fate.
Yeah.
Yeah, fate.
It's not and it's destiny or something.
Yeah. Well, I have a different notion of fate, and I think that people think of fate in the old way, meaning you have no control over that fate is something static, and you just have to get carried along with it like a flood. But I think of fate as also the place you find yourself, that somehow you never expected to be there, and it is unexpected, you're there, and then you can move from there. You don't have to go down the river, you can go a different way. And so I think fate can be changed because it is your fate.
Exactly. You already showed us a picture of the band, the rock band.
Yes, that shameful part of my... the Rock Bottom Remainders was created over 20 years ago, back at a time when it was shameful. It would have been shameful for me to wear that costume. And I was close to 40 and was like, You know, it was
Looked good.
kind of funny back then, and then over the years it became kind of ludicrous. Now it's pathetic. You know, you see older women, they're wearing mini skirts and heavy makeup and all of this, and it's, you know, go for it. But on me, it looks a little pathetic. But we do this for fun, and because we need to, you know, we can't take ourselves seriously. Our excuse is we're raising money for charity, for First Amendment rights, but it really is because we love playing together. The members of the band include Stephen King, Dave Barry, Mitch Albom. These are people you may not recognize if you don't live in the United States, so they're very big authors in terms of their people who are known. Matt Groening, I saw somebody ask me to sign a Simpson. I was on The Simpsons, and I was yelling at Lisa in a book fair, telling her oh, Mrs. Tan, I love the mother-daughter thing. And I said, that's not what my books are about. Sit down, I'm ashamed for the both of us. So Matt Groening is a friend. You know, that's how he got me on The Simpsons, which to young people, that's the greatest thing I've ever done. He's in the band. Roger McGuinn of the Byrds, he's a real rock and roll person. Roger McGuinn, Warren Zevon, he was with our band till he died. Judy Collins has sung with us. The boss, what's his name? Bruce Springsteen. Wow. Excuse me, that's jet lag. Bruce Springsteen has played with us. So we've had a lot of real people.
You should, yeah.
Al Cooper.
You should come over to Amsterdam. I'm sure that we can find a good venue.
Yeah, you know, the joke only goes so far. I think it's not international. You know, you really have to know, you know, Dave Barry, oh, wow. I don't think Dave Barry crosses the Atlantic, you know.
You do.
So, yeah, you know, but we have a great time. We retired 2 years ago, but we're still, now we have like the Rolling Stones, we have what's it called, the reunion tour or something like that. Yeah, now we have the reunion tour. We'll be playing next in Tucson.
Oh, Arizona.
Yeah. And it's old rock and roll. It's things you would recognize, because if you didn't, we tried to, you know, you would think, what's that song, you know? But it's so familiar, because we're not a great band, we're not a really bad band, when you're not a really great band, you have to show that you don't take yourself seriously, because if you do, then people think you're really a lousy band. But it's all in appearance and attitude.
But you must have good texts then.
Good what?
Texts.
I mean, you mean texting back and forth?
No, I mean, because you are such a good writer, you have good lyrics, texts.
Oh, good lyrics. No, I've been singing the same song for the last 20-something years. These boots are made for walking. I hated that song, but it's because of being the dominatrix I have to sing the song, because at the end of it, I say, are you ready, boots? And then I say, bend over, boys. And all the boys in the band, I'm the only girl now, all the boys in the band bend over, and I whip them. I have a whip, and then people think I'm really great. So that's my role in the band. I have never, I would say almost never, maybe one time I remembered the lyrics. Almost every time I sing this for over 20 years, I always flub the lyrics. I can't remember them, but it's part of the act. I can't remember them. I come in and I think, what's the next line? And then I look at Dave Barry, and he is laughing hysterically, and he shouts them out to me. And that's all part of it, so it doesn't matter. It's not, you know, it's wonderful not to take yourself too seriously. And I learned through that experience a very wonderful lesson, and that is about the audience. I used to find it so awful to give speeches. I thought I was saying the same thing over and over again. But no, it's different every time, because the audience is different. And what the audience gives to you is a reflection of what you also, it's an interactive thing. You give to the audience, they give back to you. And you're figuring that during every performance. At the end of every gig, as we call it, we are in the back, and the first thing we talk about is, hey, how about that audience? So we talk about different qualities of the audience.